In this tribute show to some of the fallen heroes, we're going to make a special notice of our dear friend, Chris Graham, who's been on the show numerous times, but Chris is a true American hero. In fact, he was appointed to the State Guard, to head the State Guard by Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. And let me just read to you what he said when he reactivated the State Guard after 75 years. He introduced me, he said, he started out as an enlisted Marine, worked his way up the ranks, served as an officer for 20 years, earned a Purple Heart along the way. He's been a helicopter pilot. He served 3 tours in Iraq. He's been a special projects officer and created the model for the anti-terrorism battalion companies, including their pre-deployment training and their standard operating procedures for close quarter battles and personal security detail operations. Those are significant high levels of training. Ron DeSantis picked our friend Chris because he was so good at what he did and he loved America. And as I mentioned before, he wrote the article, Lead by Example, and his example was stellar. So I want to introduce you to 2 friends, Colonel Tommy Waller in the Marine Corps Reserves, and also John Guandolo, who served in the Marines, Naval Academy grad, and also served in the FBI. So let's start with Tommy and let him share some reflections about his friend Chris.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you for the introduction. What an honor to be able to honor the life of Chris Graham. I'll never forget the first time that I met him. It was actually at drill. We happened to both be serving in the same Marine Corps Reserve Unit, 3rd Force Reconnaissance in Mobile, Alabama. So I was just coming in as the executive officer of the XO, and he was serving as the air officer. And we got to talking about what we do in the civilian world. We call it the civilian world. And he asked about my job, and I kind of thought for sure that he's not going to recognize the nonprofit that I work for. But I just said, well, I just work for a national security related nonprofit out of Washington. Okay, which one? The Center for Security Policy. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, Frank Gaffney. Yeah, I was just sharing a stage with him at an event with Kevin Freeman. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what? You were sharing stage with my boss at an event? So you know Kevin Freeman? Yeah, man, Kevin Freeman and I have been friends for a long time. In fact, he's got a new book out, Game Plan. I said, yeah, I know. I just did it on audio. He's like, yeah, well, I endorsed the book. What? You, like the air officer in our unit, you endorsed his book? And so sure enough, you can look in Game Plan and you can see Chris Graham's endorsement. That's how we met, and just recognizing that, like, what a small world, right? So here's a Marine officer who started off as an enlisted Marine, recon Marine at that same unit, and worked his way up through the ranks, eventually becoming an officer, a pilot with plenty of combat experience, eventually a Joint Tactical Air Controller, or JTAC, controlling aviation assets and putting warheads on foreheads, as they say, over and over, and actually did a whole lot of work for other government agencies in different capacities throughout his time serving this country. And one of the things that I just recall that separated Chris Graham from the regular humans, besides just the fact that he looked like Superman and was towering above most of us, was his towering intellect and his appreciation for understanding threats to this country. A lot of us are able to observe the world around us, to study our adversaries, to study the doctrine of our adversaries, but very few of us can actually translate that into helping other people understand it in creative ways, right? So a lot of us can brief these things. What Chris Graham was able to do is actually translate that into written form in fictional books. And I thought that was just an amazing talent he had. So there's 2 books that he wrote called, it's the Unrestricted Warfare series. The first called Election Disinformation. And so that was a fictional book. It was a story. But if you read that book, you will see real world history and events that took place over the last 15 years. You'll recognize when you read the different characters in the book, if you have been watching world events, you'll know exactly who these players are. He couldn't name them by name, but he tells the story of how these things could actually happen in the real world with respect to espionage and influence, assassination, all the things that evil people do in order to create the opportunity for tyranny. And so Chris Graham really stood in the face of that tyranny. His life's calling was to help all of us, to lead us, to help us to understand that tyranny and to fight it.